Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel is for heart-centered leaders just like you. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. These interview sessions are sponsored by our great friends at Elevate Online Marketing. On episode 198, I'm joined by Dr. John Demartini. He is a world-leading human behaviour specialist, researcher, best-selling author, educator, and founder of the Demartini Method, a revolutionary tool in modern psychology. Dr. John has authored 40 books that have been translated into 39 different languages and presented his insights alongside some of the world's most influential people, including Sir Richard Branson and Deepak Chopra. Dr. Demartini's cutting-edge methods are the culmination of almost 5 decades of research across disciplines including physics, philosophy, theology, metaphysics, psychology, astronomy, mathematics, neurology, and physiology. He has synthesized these teachings and incorporated them into his work on human values. Dr. Demartini shares his life, business, financial, relationship, and leadership empowerment strategies with people all over the globe, enabling them to transform their lives according to their highest values. We have an incredibly deep conversation. As you can tell, Dr. John is a well-educated fellow, and I really enjoyed time in his company. I really enjoy putting my curious questions to him. You could probably tell from the couple of moments of silence as I just take in the wisdom that he shares. Listen out for those moments of silence as the penny drops for me in some of these conversations. I hope that you enjoy the questions that I ask. I hope that you enjoy Dr. John's responses. Please do head to his website and check out more of his work, more of his content. And go and check out his latest book, The 7 Secret Treasures, the transformational blueprint for a well-lived life. Here we go, episode 198 with Dr. John Demartini. Dr. John Demartini, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I'm really excited to talk about your new book, The 7 Secret Treasures, the transformational blueprint of for a well-lived life. What's inspired the why now? Why write a book about living a well-lived life?
Well, I've been working on that for 50 years, not the book, but that pursuit. And I've written many books, all sort of around that area, that genre. But this particular book was just it's not a massive compendium. It's an inspiring, concise book on specific action steps that a human being can do to find a hidden order in their apparent chaos and to see life on the way, not in the way, and things to help empower each of the 7 areas of life. So to develop their mind, to develop their career, to develop their wealth, their family, their social life, their physical health and well-being, and what inspires them. So many people, particularly after COVID, have had some derailments, some challenges along the way. And so we thought that it would be wise to give some tips based on what we've been experiencing, interacting with people for the last few years, that we might assist them in becoming more poised and present and purposeful and prioritized.
I love that. And I know that you don't go anywhere without talking about values. And last week I had parenting expert Dr. Gordon Neufeld on the show. And one of the really powerful things I took away from Dr. Gordon was this idea that as parents, it was to help our children find their values so that they can come to the world as an expression of those values. Because in absence of that, they would see the world's values as their cost of acceptance. And I found that really, really powerful to think about, from a perspective of a parent. And I know that you talk about how sometimes society and culture injects values into us. Many of the people that are listening to my podcast, they'd have explored the concept of values. How might you guide someone through understanding whether that's their own value or maybe something that's been injected into them?
Well, I've definitely addressed that issue for 45 years. So if you have to ask the question, it's not yours. And if you hear yourself saying, I've got to do this, I have to do this, I must do this, I ought to do this, I should do this, I'm supposed to do this, I need to do this, it's not theirs. There's some sort of outer authority that they've subordinated to, that they've inculcated and injected, that they're attempting to pursue, living up to mommies, daddies, preachers, teachers, mores, conventions, traditions of society, fitting into the herd and having an internal conflict about what's really meaningful to them. But when they're doing something that's really meaningful to them, they're inspired, they're grateful, they love what they're doing, they're enthusiastic about it, they're certain about it because they develop skills in it because it's spontaneously where they want to learn most, and they're present, they're engaged. So if you're not seeing those 6 things and you're hearing a bunch of imperatives, you can be assured that it's some sort of a inculcated value from somebody they've subordinated to.
Yeah.
Or depend on.
Hey, my friends, I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Just wanted to take a quick moment to let you know that we are in the middle of our first cohort of Good Fathers, a 6-week group coaching program for dads. It is my heart to create a space for these good men, to leave them better for those who call them dads. We're having some intentional, purposeful conversations that I can see the men in front of me are transforming in front of my eyes. They are having conversations that they've never had with anyone else, and it is powerful, and it is going to help them be much more loving and intentional fathers, intentional partners. And because I have such undying belief in the power of this group, I am bringing about a second cohort. Starting on Monday the 9th of January 2023, we're going to kick off with cohort 2. If you are a dad that wants to be even better for those who call you dad, then head over to the website abty.co.uk/goodfathers. The link is in the show notes. Have a look, and it'd be my honour and privilege to have you come and join us and other good men from around the world as we journey in what it means to be a good father. Here we go. Back to the interview. That's really powerful. You know, I guess you're talking about an inner wisdom, an inner genius, which is, you know, not to give too much away. Obviously, I encourage listeners to get the book, but, you know, your first treasure is all about understanding, you know, wisdom and the power of genius. And I find it fascinating that you talk about the conventional labeling of ADD, you know, an attention deficit disorder. And you know, what is your perspective on ADD?
Well, the first time can I share a story? Maybe that would be appropriate.
Yeah, please.
So I first got, I guess, fascinated by ADD when I was about 25. And even though I had heard about it, even though I had seen many people with it, I probably had a bit of that myself. I think a lot of people do. I had a young boy brought in by his mother into my office. And she was the person who was coming for care, but he was running around, and he was running back and forth in a 7.5 by 10-foot room in this little cubicle. And he was just running back and forth and hitting the walls and running back and forth, running back and forth, running back and forth. And it was a bit distracting. And the mother just was kind of ignoring it, but the child was just hyperactive. And then I asked the mother, go to a moment where and when you perceive your son really stop, present, and engaged. And she says, I don't know, I can't think of it. I said, just stop, reflect. Because everybody's imposing the labels of hyperactivity on him. Yeah. It says when he's playing with his train set or doing something with trains. Okay. So I said, I stopped the boy. Well, I didn't stop him. I just said, so do you like trains, huh? And he goes, yep. And he still runs. And I said, what's the longest train you've ever perceived in your life, seen in your life? And he stopped and he looks up and he thinks, he goes, you mean how many cars? Yeah, how many cars? Wow. 250 cars? Yeah. And I went, great. And how many of those cars were tank cars, box cars, flatbed red cars, et cetera, et cetera. I broke them down. And he goes, He's quiet, focused, not running. And then I said, when you look at his space in his room, is there something to do with trains? She goes, he has train models. He has train sets sitting up. He's got train magazines. He's got train books. He's got train pictures all over his room. Trains is his thing. I said, so when he's doing trains, he's engaged and he's focused. Now that I think about it, yeah, he can sit down and put a model train together, totally focused, and complete that model. And he can read a book on it. I said, he has a concentrated value system, and he's trying to fit into a school where it's dispersed and none of them are being linked to trains. And so he's disengaged. And so he's not in his executive area, he's in the amygdala. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go, you live in Pasadena, Texas. It's a kind of I call it the refinery area of town. And I said, there's a train that goes there every day. I want you to take him over there and see and count how many train cars there are. I want him to do the math on the ratios of all the cars for his study of math. I want him to go and find out what country and what language on each of these cars to see how many languages and how many countries is involved. And see if he can study a bit of language on that and report that to his teacher.
Yeah.
I want to find out how many of those tank cars, what's the chemistry of those cars? Try to find out what is inside those cars and where they're coming from. And I started to get him engaged, and he was like, cool, you writing that down, Mom? And he's like totally engaged in that. And he literally was expecting his mom to take him over there so he could do this research. And he found out how many engines and the ratios of them. So we end up engaging him in mathematics because math was now important to him.
Yeah.
And sociology because now it was important to him. And so, and language because I wanted to study the different words that were all over that and make him study and read. So as long as he's focused on that, he had attention surplus order. Attention surplus is a part of the thalamus that selectively biases and filters out information out of the environment based on what you believe is most important to you that will help you fulfill it.
Wow.
And so he believed that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be involved in the train industry. Now, I have a friend that just sold the Southern Pacific Railroad. That's on the ship with me. And, so he was a child that was into trains. And his parents were saying, you need to go and study over here. But he ended up buying a train company and becoming a billionaire. So, for all we know, that kid may not be fitting into the average drone training system. He may be dedicated to be one of the great train specialists for all you know. So finding out what is intrinsically valuable to a child and then honoring that and seeing where he's focused or she's focused. I guarantee every child has an area where that is. You just got to find it first.
Yeah.
Narrow down what the values are. And then you have to relate and link the other topics to that. I'm really great at that. I can take any kid with any focus and I can take any class and I can link it to them. And all of a sudden they're engaged in that class. They now want to learn that class because it's going to get them what they want. If they don't see how a class is going to help them fulfill what they want, they're not engaged. And they're only going to do short-term memory. And it's not going to go in, it's not going to stay, and it's not going to be applied. But the second they can see how it's going to fulfill what's important to them, now it goes in long-term memory, now it's retained, and now it's applied. Perception, decisions, and actions change. So in finding out what the child's value is, that's one of the things in the 7 Secret Treasure, the book, is identifying what the child's values are. In South Africa, we had a township, Alexander Township. It's a low socioeconomic area, very, very impoverished. And lovely people, but they may make $300, $400, $600 a year. And so $1 a day to $2 a day. The schools were not exactly what you possibly are accustomed to in some more developed countries. I mean, some of them didn't have floors, some of them didn't have desks, some of them didn't have books. You know, kids would come to school if they fed them. That was it. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to school.
Mm.
And there was a 27% pass rate in the school. 27 out of every child that was taking the matric test passed. So it wasn't doing well. So we were asked to go in there by the Board of Education. And I went in there and I took all the teachers and identified what their highest values were, most intrinsic value. I took the classes that they were teaching, some of which were not inspiring to them. And I did links for 3.5 hours. I spent 4 hours with the teachers, 3.5 hours in linking, 30 minutes determining their values, and 3.5 hours linking each of the classes to their values so they would be more engaged. Because a child's not going to want to listen to a teacher that's not inspired by teaching. You know, if you're teaching a class that's boring and you're not involved in it, no kid's going to listen to it.
Yeah.
So we got them more engaged. Then we went to the class on the first day of school. We went to the class where the kids are. We found out what their values are. It took about 30 minutes. And then we linked all the classes to their values for 3.5 hours. So 4 hours, 4 hours. Then I did one more class where I took the values of the students, all of their individual values. We all did it. We summarized them. And then the teacher had to link those values. How will those values, helping fulfill those values, help them fulfill their own? And then how is her values going to help them fulfill theirs? And we crisscrossed them and had this dialogue for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So a total of 12 hours. The engagement level went up. At the end of the year, the lady from the Board of Education, she says, Dr. Demartini, I have something that's going to be something meaningful to you. I said, what's that? She said, we had 97% pass rate this year.
Oh, come on.
97. I was expecting 40, 47.
Yeah. Wow.
97. The
Wow.
reason being is because the teachers got it, the students got it, and they realized that if they're waiting for the teachers to make them intelligent, it's not going to happen. They have to get engaged. And the more they can see how their classes are going to help them fulfill their values, they're going to school because they want to learn. Everybody wants to learn what's important to them.
Yeah.
It may be video games, it may be social memories. I was doing a reality TV show out in Universal Studios one time. And there was a guy there that thought he had no memory. Okay. I had the responsibility of transforming 12 people's lives in 24 hours. One strop, 24 hours, 12 hours, 12 people, 2 hours each. And this guy believed he had no memory. He was a janitor. He had no memory, couldn't remember things. And the first question I asked him is, how long do you remember not having the ability to remember? He said, as long as I can remember. And I said, we narrowed it down and found out that he knew everything about his family, their birth dates, their background. He retained everything about that, but nobody ever asked him about that. They only asked him about stuff that wasn't important to him, and he just failed at learning and remembering. Once we found that, I showed him how to link other things to that. And he came out of the idea that he had no memory and was able to give himself permission to go back to college, go back to school and college. Because he realized now, I don't have a lack of memory. I had a concentrated memory and nobody was relating to it. None of the classes and all the labels on me, nobody found what my priority was. Now that I know how to use that priority and link all the other things I want to learn to it, I can now excel. So values are crucial.
That's really powerful. And you know, those children become adults, and those adults hopefully enter into loving relationships and marriages. And the thing that you say in your book, which I find really interesting, I've been with my wife 20 years this year, since we were 15. And I did like the bit that you said it's comical that the universe puts sometimes opposites together in this sense of entanglement. But you talk about, if you don't start to understand each other's highest values, that it's careless. What do you mean by that?
Okay. If you, the way the brain is set up, when you're living in your highest values, your blood glucose and oxygen goes into your executive function, which is the prefrontal cortex. That means when you're living congruently with what you value most, your blood goes into the forebrain. If you don't, and you're not feeling fulfilled, and you're trying to live by lower values or somebody else's values, the blood goes down and goes into the amygdala.
Mm.
The amygdala wants to avoid pain, seek pleasure, avoid predators, seek prey, avoid shame, seek pride, avoid nightmare, seek fantasy.
Mm.
So as a result of it, we tend to think that we are better, we're right in our values. And we also have a fantasy that people are supposed to live in our values. So when we're not engaged and inspired, we are more vulnerable to that. And now if you take the other individual and they're not engaged and they're not inspired and they're now believing their values are right, you got a clash. And so two people are projecting their values onto each other. And they're trying to get the other person into their values, which is futile. Anybody who's been married knows if you try to get your spouse to be like you, you're just going to be wasting your time.
Right. Lived experience that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is when you're careful, you're minimizing your values to somebody else and you're walking on eggshells. Anybody who's been infatuated with somebody in the underdog position automatically is careful because they don't want to lose the person. They don't want to upset them. So they're afraid to say anything negative that challenges them. And they're going to say positive things and repress what they really think until eventually it explodes.
Yeah.
But if they go the other way and they're now self-righteous and they're arrogant and think they're right, they're careless. They care less about the individual than themselves, and they project their values on them and expect them to live in their values. Neither which win or last are sustainable. And all the symptoms of either of those two things teach you to humble your pride, lift up your thing, and level the playing field where you have caring, which keeps the rings on the finger. Caring is you have equanimity within yourself, not pride or shame, which is an exaggeration, minimization of self. And equity between you and others. You're not putting them on a pedestal or pit, you're just putting them in your heart. And that's the one that's sustainable. And that's the one that people eventually have to learn, either through trial and error or through learning.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You know, I through a good friend, Luke Burrows, I asked a question about the purpose, true purpose of love being authenticity, and I really enjoyed your answer on his show. And I guess one of the things I read in your book, which talks about how being in relationship is the greatest kind of feedback mechanism for authenticity. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, all relationships that work, social, partner, children, or whatever, are all teaching us through the symptomatology that it generates, the dynamic, how to be authentic, how to be not exaggerate or minimize yourself. Because anytime you go up, you're going to get humbled. Anytime you're down, you're going to be lifted to get back in equilibrium. In fact, all the symptoms of our life are trying to get us there. But the intimate relationship, the spouse, for instance, because you've kind of got a social contract, either because of religion or politics or whatever, it's not as easy to just walk away from. So you're going to have to kind of, you have a little bit more, what do you say, responsibility and accountability to get your crap together, you know, to learn about yourself and learn how to deal with things. And so that's the value of that social contract, is basically is assisting you on holding yourself accountable to learn how to be authentic. And to the degree that you do, the relationships start to flourish. And that's where they are. I mean, I just consulted with two people in Monte Carlo the other day who've been married for quite a number, 3 decades. And, you know, it's like a rocket. When you first take off, it has a lot of its energy going into correction until it eventually finds its center, and then it goes off. It's correcting systems. And so I think that's what most relationships are. You learn as you go, and then eventually you kind of settle down a path. And some people don't. Some people keep wanting to be right, and they stay in their amygdala, and they're not really objective. They're subjective, and they're constantly imposing expectations. I worked with a lady just last night in Australia that was not respecting or understanding her husband's actions. He was in what they call a kind of a screwed squared position, if that makes any sense. I want you to go and build me a house and have me a house and have lots of money, but I want you to spend time with the kids. So it's like, if I'm with the kids, I'm not making money. If I'm making money, I'm not with the kids. I can try to do a balance, but if you want me to do this, I got to figure out how to be more effective here or more effective here or something. And so he was being alienated in his mind because he couldn't win. He didn't think he could win. And so I had to kind of crack the unrealistic expectation that people are going to get a pleasure without a pain, an ease without a difficulty. There's always a pair of opposites come. And sometimes people get addicted to the fantasy and project fantasies onto other people and expect them to be one-sided or expect them to live in their values, or instead of honoring them enough to communicate what you want in terms of their values. And it's a selling process. Every relationship is a selling process. Caring is selling. It's the same thing. We go to seminars on how to sell for our customers, but we often don't go to seminars on how to sell to our spouses and to our husbands and wives. We're not learning how to care enough to listen to what their values and needs are and articulate what we want in terms of what they want, so they win doing what we want. And that's a science. There's a science to it.
That's powerful. You said the word addicted, and you used that word in the context of happiness, and that happiness being an addiction, but one that leads to sadness as a response. What do you think is the problem when it comes to a culture of happiness?
Well, Aristotle talked about two forms of happiness. One is an immediate gratifying hedonistic pursuit of a pleasure without a pain, which is a kind of an infatuated dopamine rush. And the other is pursuing something that's deeply meaningful and fulfilling. He called eudaimonia. And that one was something that was meaningful. That means that fulfillment is coming from the embracing of both support and challenge, the two sides, not just one side.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of a magnet because it's a simple analogy. If I said, I'm going to give you this magnet, and I want you to give me the positive pull back without the negative pull. And if you do, I'll give you $1 billion cash. How's that? Oh, wow. So you'll take the magnet, you chop it in half, and then you'll go, okay, here's the positive pull of the magnet. And then I go and get the magnet, and you think you gave me the positive half, but then you found out that I got a positive, negative, and a positive, negative. So I said, well, you still got positive, negative. So we're measuring both positive, negative. It's just a half a magnet now, but it's still got positive, negative. He said, well, okay, I need to cut it faster. So he cuts it faster. And he says, now here's the positive pole. Still got a positive and negative. And so people can spend their lives pursuing a one-sided magnet with futility. And the frustration of getting that one side becomes now the nightmare to balance the fantasy. And so they don't realize they can't get one without the other. I mean, think about it this way. If you're conscious of somebody's upsides and unconscious of downsides, and you're infatuated with them, like many people are, like Michael Douglas was with Glenn Close originally, before Fatal Attraction, the movie. And so if all of a sudden he's infatuated with her and he thinks, oh, there's going to be more positive, negatives, more advantage and disadvantage. Oh, I'm going to seek and impulsively go after that. But then a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years later, you went, ooh, it's not what I thought. There's the other side. I was unconscious of it. And now I'm smacked by the other side. And then whenever you're infatuated, you fear its loss. Just like if you resent something, you fear its gain. So the more you try to polarize life and try to get a one-sided life, or try to avoid a one-sided life, the more the other side is joined. So if you infatuate, you fear its loss. If you resent, you fear its gain. So you're living in fear as long as you're trying to not embrace both sides of life. But if you're in a marriage, and I went up to my marriage partner, I said, honey, you're always positive, never negative, always kind, never cruel, always giving, never taking, always peace, never war, always considerate, never inconsiderate. She goes, if you say so, I don't know about that. And if I say she's always mean and never nice and always cruel and never kind, the other way, she goes, if you say so, I don't know about that. But I say, if I say to her, sometimes you're kind, sometimes you're cruel, sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're mean. When I support your values, you're nice to me like a pussycat. When you go against your values, you're mean as a tiger. Then she'll go, that's true. People automatically, intuitively have an internal psychostat, a thermostat, to know that they have both sides. But people sometimes allow their amygdala to make them search for a one-sided relationship or a one-sided human being, or one side within themselves. And these lead to moral hypocrisies. They're unobtainable. The Buddha says the desire for that which is the desire for that which is unavailable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable of the magnet, of the source of suffering. That's our source of suffering.
Which means that we are willing participants in our suffering.
Absolutely. And our suffering is not our suffering, really. Our suffering is a feedback mechanism to try to let us know that we're pursuing something that's not highest in our values, because of what's highest in our values, we embrace both sides of it.
Yeah.
When people pursue challenges that inspire them, they wake up their genius. If somebody is trying to avoid challenges, they're going to keep attracting challenges they don't want, which is distress. But when they're pursuing challenges that inspire them, it's eustress, it's wellness promoting.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that concept. I saw one of your videos where you talked about how you went through the Oxford Dictionary and you circled nearly 4,600 words or states of being, behaviors, and it was at the point where you came to realize that, as you talk so eloquently about having complementary opposite behaviors present at different times, and you've come to this understanding that they are either displayed when values are supported or when values are challenged or not supported. And I guess is that the purpose of emotions and values, do you believe?
I think that if we look at where they originate and what there is, let's develop that, because that's a really cool insight, and that really people, their light bulbs go on if they get it.
Yeah.
If you are infatuated with somebody, you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides.
Yeah.
You wake the nucleus accumbens and the amygdala up. It creates an impulse. It adds valency to the hippocampus, which is the memory center, and you now have a seeking of impulse towards that, because it represents prey and food to you, and you don't want to be starving. You want it to eat. So you have a natural, that's why you want to consume people that you are infatuated with. You want to call them honey bunny, sweetie pie, cupcakes, sweetheart. It's all sugary because you want to get your tongue on them, want to kiss them and stuff. So when you're infatuated with them like that, again, you have the fear of loss. But whenever you do that and you put them on a pedestal and infatuate, you tend to minimize yourself, because you're now too humble to admit what you see in them inside you. And you think they have something you don't have, so you seek them. But that minimization of self is a disowned part of yourself, a dismembered part, and a deflected part. And that creates a missingness, an emptiness, because anytime you judge somebody, there's an emptiness. Now, if you go the other side and resent somebody, and you're now conscious of the downsides, not conscious of the upsides, and now you're too proud to admit you have that. Now you disown that part, and you're too proud. And so you look down on them, and you think you're superior to them. And you go, I don't have those negative traits. And so now you disown those. Each disowned part, each deflected, dismembered part creates a void that leaves you feeling empty when you judge. Because there's a part of you intuitively know that whatever you're resenting is a part of you that you're ashamed of, that you're hiding and trying to dissociate from, and holding on to pride and judging them because they're reminding you of it. And on the part on there that you admire, it's because you're too humble to admit it, but you have the same behavior, but you're too humble to admit it. And you like being around them because they're reminding you of what you admire in yourself. So the truth is that there is a reflective awareness, and the individual that has pure reflective awareness has true intimacy. They don't have missing parts, and they're able to embrace somebody. So these voids drive the values in life towards fulfillment. Fulfilling means to see that nothing's missing. So we judge things, create an emptiness, create these voids that want to be filled, that then determine our navigation through life to try to fulfill them. The hierarchy of our voids is determining the hierarchy of our values, which is determining our perceptions, decisions, and actions to try to find fulfillment of the empty parts.
Yeah, so powerful, isn't it? And I've come to understand, because the realization you had that is that they can be both present and that they never really go away. They're just less expressed in different ways. And I've come to the realization that it's a bit like David and Goliath. Like the story of David and Goliath, I don't believe to be an underdog story. I believe it to be a greatest strength, greatest weakness. I believe Goliath's strength was his strength. I believe his weakness was his strength. And David was quick and nimble, and obviously it's a strategy. You know, I think, you know, David's strength counteracted Goliath's weakness. Anyway, that's to one side. It's given me the understanding that greatest strengths, greatest weakness, two sides of the same coin. And
Yes.
And one of the things you say in your talks is that when we love ourselves, or not, when we want to improve ourselves, we're often saying, actually, I want to get rid of half of ourselves. And I think what you're saying is love is the synthesis of both of those sides.
You don't have to get rid of any part of yourself to love yourself.
Right.
When I teach the Breakthrough Experience, which is one of my signature programs, every week I do, people are trying to get rid of some part of themselves and trying to get this other part that they admire in somebody else. And it's just a futile thing. And I try to explain to them that nothing's missing in you. It's already there. You're just not honoring the form. Maybe I can share a story about that. That's a really good story.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a guy that came to me, and he was a doctor, and he said, Dr. Demartini, I'd like to hire you and consult with you to try to help me become successful. I said, great. The first question I asked him, okay, where are you successful? And he said, no, I'm not successful. I want to be successful. And that's why I'm hiring you. I said, great. So where are you successful? Dr. Demartini, I'm not sure I'm making myself clear. I'm not. I want to be. And I said, well, I'm not making myself clear. I'm asking you, where are you? I already know you are. You haven't realized where you are. So where are you successful? Where are you actually achieving something that's deeply meaningful that you are striving for? And all of a sudden he goes, oh, well, I have a really amazing relationship with my wife. We've been together we've known each other for 11 years, been married 10 years, and it's a bang on relationship. I mean, we're like two peas in a pod. I said, fantastic. So would you agree that you have what other would be considered quite an achievement there? He said, okay, yes. Great. Where's your next success, next achievement? He said, well, I got a 10-year-old son almost, and he's in baseball, and we're possibly going to win the pennant. I'm the coach, and we're possibly going to win the pennant this summer. I said, great. So you have that as a goal too, didn't you? He goes, I did actually. Yes. And I love being with my son and being with the family and playing ball. What's the next one? He said, well, my mother-in-law lives with us, and most people don't get along with their mother-in-law, but we have this amazing relationship. She's just super. And I'm very inspired to have her. And she takes care of us and helps with the kids. And most people couldn't even imagine living with the mother-in-law, but we really have a family. I said, fantastic. What else? Well, we work in the yard, and the whole family's in the yard, and they all have these little gardens and stuff and flowers and stuff. And we're probably going to get the yard of the month for July this year. I said, great. And what else? Okay, well, I'm a lay minister on Wednesdays, and sometimes on Sundays I do classes that are involved at the church. And I had a dream to be participating in the church as sort of an educational person. I said, okay. So can you see you have a series of successes? He goes, okay. I said, but the reason why you think you're not successful is because you're comparing yourself to somebody else you think's got more success. So who is that? He said, I think I know who it is. It's this guy up on top of the hill. He's got a 6,000 square foot home. He's got 3-car garage. He's got a bunch of cars, got a big practice, and I don't have that. I said, okay, great. You know the guy pretty well? Yep. And he says, how's his relationship with his wife? Well, it's interesting you ask. I think they've kind of separated like 3 times. They get back together again. It's an absolutely drama case. It goes back and forth. They're yelling at each other. It's a very volatile relationship. And I said, okay. And how's his relationship with his son? Yeah, well, they're having problems with him. He's not wanting to go to school, and he's doing drugs, and he's this and this. And what about the mother-in-law? Yeah, they moved out of the country to get away from her. They literally moved completely out of the country away from his mother-in-law. No way they could do that. He'd kill her. And I said, and what about the yard? They got people that do that. I don't think they even notice their yard. Sometimes they're not even paying attention to it. And what about church on Sundays or Wednesdays? Is he involved in any of those things? He goes, no, that's not his thing. He's focused on business. I said, first thing I want to share with you is that this man is not more successful than you. He is achieving according to what he values, which is more business and finance. And lower in his values is relationship and spirituality. You have a very high value on relationships, family, and spirituality, and a little less focus on business and finance. He said, that's true. And I said, so anytime you compare yourself with somebody else that's got a different set of values, that's like a cat expecting to climb, to swim like a fish, or a fish try to climb a tree like a cat. You're going to have self-defeating. He goes, I've been doing that. He said, but is there anything I can do to shift the values a bit to make it where I get a little bit more business and finance? I said, yeah, I can do that. But just know that if I take those that are lower values and I make them higher and I slide them in higher on the list, which I can do, I can show you how to do that. The other ones are going to come down a bit. So are you willing to give up some of the highlights you have now just a bit to have that new form? And he goes, yes, but not too much. I said, then we'll rearrange it and I'll link the new values of business and finance up to your highest values now. But just know there's going to be a little bit more energy because you only have so many hours in a day. You're now going to put a little bit more energy into business and finance and maybe a little bit less in these other areas. And that's not a bad thing. That gentleman has benefits and drawbacks in his life. You're going to have benefits and drawbacks in your life, but there's going to be a shift. Because if you try to get the benefits of everybody, you're going to end up with life dysmorphia. Because if you compare your life to everybody else's highlights of their life, you'll never appreciate your life.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And, when we talk about the topic of love, so often a human love is a conditional love, and which is why I believe many go to spirituality to receive a type of unconditional love that they've never received from a human being. How much does that feature in living a well-lived life?
Well, I think you're going to have both. It's kind of like love making. Sometimes you're going to be doing the animal passions and it's going to be one form, and other times you're going to have a love and intimacy, eye to eye, heart to heart, mystical love kind of moment. And if you expect one without the other, you're probably going to be a little bit let down. There's going to be moments when you have unconditional love in life. There's going to be moments when you have conditional love. A relationship's utilitarian. When I ask women in the breakthrough experience, how many women here are looking for a handsome man that if you had a child with, you would be interested in looking at that child? Something that's attractive. And you go, yeah, of course. So he's got broad shoulders, nice tight buns, nice chest, nice jaw, pretty eyes. You're looking for a trophy guy. Great. And then you're looking for somebody who's intelligent. And then you're looking for somebody who's got some ambition. And you're looking for somebody who's got some resources. And you're looking for somebody that really wants you and is going to be with you. You're looking for somebody that's got some social interaction and savvy. So if you introduce him, he's a good trophy. You want somebody that's obviously inspired. I said, so you're looking for a utilitarian partner that's filling in needs, that's helping you, give you an advantage in the 7 areas of your life. They go, yeah. And I said, so it's utilitarian. And if all of a sudden you married a guy that does all that, and all of a sudden he gets a brain damage and he can't think now, and he stops work and he doesn't make any money, and he doesn't treat you well, and he gets aggressive, and he's not inspired, and he sits at home and just eats and gains weight or whatever, you're going to have a hard time pretending that you're committed to that. You're going to be, you also had utilitarian reasons. So there's conditional components. And then there's also this part of us that have moments of true unconditional love where we just feel the presence and we're in a transcendental state. And that happens too. So you can increase the probability of that, but you're not going to have one completely without the other. You need both along the journey. And so whatever you can transcend and know, but there's always a mystery and unknown out there that you'll probably judge and have conditions on until you then know that about people. And they're constantly growing. So it's about a mixture of two. So if you have that realistic expectation and not a fantasy of one-sidedness or a one outcome, then you're probably going to do more stable in relationship than having a fantasy of one. It's always supposed to be one way.
I think one of the flaws in human condition is to learn to appreciate things once we've lost them. Unfortunately, we've become a society that tends to regret or not, learns to appreciate something that, unfortunately, on the other side of tragedy, grief or loss. And I think sometimes the greatest thing that we can do is learn to appreciate all that we have without having to lose it first. And, I think you talk about gratitude being the thing that connects us with the power of the heart.
Yes, I just finished another book 3 days ago, two and a half
Amazing.
days ago, called The Resilient Mind. They'll be coming
Hmm.
out in about probably 6 weeks or so.
Hmm.
And The Resilient Mind has a chapter on grief, and I've developed a grief process I've been doing since 1984. Started in 1976, but clinically since 1984. And it's a very powerful tool. I've used it in many, many countries. And we only grieve the loss of the parts of an individual that we were infatuated with.
Mm.
And the parts that we resented in them, we don't grieve the loss of. When Soleimani, the Iranian general, was killed by Trump's team, America, because they saw him as a villain, celebrated. But in Iran, 5 million people came out and mourned because he was a hero in their country. And so they mourned the loss. In our country, he was a villain, so we celebrated the loss. So the things you dislike in people, you don't feel the grief of, the loss of. The parts you admire in them, because you're infatuated with them, you got dopamine. Now you have withdrawal symptoms from the dopamine, which we call grief. So that's only because you're unconscious of the downsides and you're only conscious of the upsides on those parts you're grieving. So there's a science on how to neutralize both of them. So there's not grief and relief, it's just love. And you feel the presence of them, even though they passed on. And it's a question on who's now taking on all the behaviors and forms that they did, because they're not lost. They're just in a form you're not honoring and recognizing.
Mm.
So if you go and find out, okay, so my wife used to show me affection this way. When she passed, who's now doing that? Well, my kids and my sister showed back up, and my mom is now there for me, and all the neighbors and some of the friends that come by and checked up on me, and people I haven't talked to in years are calling. And if you stop and look, it's just morphing. And the master lives in a world of transformation, not the illusions of gain and loss. Most people in the world are caught in, gain and loss because they're attached. Like in the Buddha said, the source of our suffering is our attachments, the things we infatuate and resent. We have the capacity to transcend that and have a moment of unconditional love and feel the presence of someone. I've been doing that since '84, helping people with that. It's very simple.
That's really powerful. You talk about you have a belief that there is a quantum field of love. I know it's not a new concept, no, it's not a new topic, but for many it will be. Quantum physics is not something that has come into the awareness of most people. So what do you believe when it comes to the quantum field of love? Because I think sometimes it's a bit esoteric, isn't it? Sometimes it's having to have that understanding beyond the intellect, or maybe not. Maybe you'll be able to share with us otherwise.
I don't know if it has to be esoteric necessarily. Brian Cox talked about space and time being emergent functions from something even deeper and more fundamental. Well, space and time is where position and momentum is, and where conditional states are. They're supposedly deterministic. So that's not esoteric. That's cutting edge science in particle accelerators, making us realize there's something more fundamental. And as the farther we go into the mysteries of Planck, the pursuit of Planck dimensions, the more we uncover something that we didn't see before. But I discovered something that I guess about 22 years ago, I was writing a book on the mysteries of the living cell, the origin of life, and the possible, how could life originate? That was the topic. And I came across in chemistry, the component of chemistry or biochemistry of redox reactions. Reduction of a molecule is a gain of electron, and oxidation is a loss of electron. And molecules are flipping electrons and exchanging electrons constantly,
Mm-hmm.
becoming acids or bases, or they're changing constantly. But there's a principle that there's never an oxidation without a reduction, or reduction without an oxidation. They're simultaneous.
Mm.
And I thought, wait a minute now. The sympathetic nervous system, which is for fight or flight when we perceive challenges, causes oxidation during the day. And the parasympathetic causes reduction mainly at night. And these are paired, and they have, when they're in perfect sync, you have autonomic regulation. And if they're out of sync, you have autonomic dysregulation, which is symptomatology and causes epigenetic indications for symptoms and disease.
Mm.
So these are actually meant to be simultaneously paired. And because they're the ones that initiate these redox reactions. So I thought, does that mean that support and challenge, support for parasympathetic and challenge, could they be redoxed in our life? So I did some research on the brain. I've been studying the brain for 44 years now. I taught neurology. And I found out that every time somebody challenges you, your mind, if it's something that you perceive has more drawbacks than benefits, the mind, if it doesn't see the benefits or doesn't see something to counterbalance the benefits in reality, will dissociate from that thing and create an artificial reality called an anti-memory. And it will create content from previous experiences that counterbalance that in order to bring homeostasis to the brain. And the brain is a negative feedback loop trying to bring homeostasis at all times to stabilize the chemistry, and it's like a buffer system. And so we have what is called anti-memories for every memory. And if we're infatuated with something, we create a paranoia, the fear of loss of it. And if we're resentful of something, we create the escape, the fantasy of the escape. So there's never a nightmare without a fantasy, or vice versa. There's never a phobia without a philia, or a philia without a phobia. There's never something that would oxidize you and catabolize you without something anabolizing you and you're reducing you. So when I did that, I started asking new questions to people who had been traumatized or ecstatized from some drug use or something. And I found out at that exact moment, synchronously, and I found a way in by asking a series of questions to get into the unconscious, to access the simultaneity of the opposite. And the moment they find it and balance it, tears of gratitude come out. Even if they're in the middle of a trauma, if they see the exact opposite, their mind goes, I wasn't traumatized. I wasn't ecstasized. I actually had the torture and ecstasy simultaneous, and now I feel appreciation and love out of the synthesis of those. And so if I go in there and I take something, a post-traumatic stress moment, and I take that and go through and take a sliver in the stream of consciousness moment by moment, and go and take each sliver and show them these pairs of opposites with every one of those perceptions, their mind is blown. There's no trauma when they're done, because they actually took the anti-memory and the memories and put them together, which is another way of Jung called what you were conscious of and what you were unconscious. The conscious and unconscious are joined, and now you're fully conscious. When you're fully conscious, you're mindful, you're not having a void of judgment, and you're in a state of love and unconditional love for a moment. It's just a moment, but now you realize that that thing you thought was terrible isn't terrible. It's just a magnificent moment of love. And that's the matrix. The matrix is a synthesis and synchronicity of all complementary opposites at any scale of being, at any moment in our life. And we have access to that. I have whole classes where I train people therapists that I train, and people that learn the method, just on how to do that for 3 days, just doing that for 3 days and scanning their life and realizing that there was nothing in their life but moments of love. That dissolves all the baggage that people are storing in their subconscious mind that's causing impulses and instincts and reacting before they even think.
Yeah. One of the things that I've added to my own personal mantra. I mean, because I used to be a guy who used to try and work my face off, try and control my destiny to the point it put me on my knees. And I've had to learn this idea of surrender, this idea of, things are beyond me. And I've come to this understanding. Part of my mantra is about leave space for the miracles. And then I read in your book that you say that actually miracles to those untrained are actually, nature's law. How is miracle part of nature's law?
Well, I've not seen a miracle, but I have seen events that were once deciphered, had an understanding and explanation, but we tend to want to supernaturalize it instead of just find out what actually occurred. But when things happen in our life, we sometimes pursue with our amygdala a pleasure without a pain, without even realizing it, a fantasy. And then we get smacked by the other side. This goes back to the, is there determination, indetermination? Is it free will, predestination, necessity, or contingency? It's the same philosophical question. But there's a solution to it. There's two types of free wills. There's the moral hypocrisy free will, where you have been in an injected value from some preacher or teacher or politician or whatever. This is good and bad. And you're making a decision. I'm going to avoid that and seek that because there's more advantage to that. And then when you actually make that decision, you find out, ooh, there's a bunch of snags there I didn't anticipate. And then you go, well, maybe my free will has got a little predestination because the opposite was there with it. And maybe I didn't have so much of free will. And you sit there with an uncertainty principle because you're sitting in this polarized state. And then there's a state that is true free will. And that is when you are not too humble to admit what you see in others inside you. You don't have them on a pedestal. You don't have them on a pedestal. And you're not too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you. You don't have them in the pit. You have it perfectly equilibrated, where there's no desire to change them relative to you, no desire to change you relative to them. There's no desire to change anything. You love it as it is. And now what is what your will intends. And you're not caught with infatuations or resentments, which preoccupy space and time in your mind and run you and put you in bondage. So there's no bondage. There's just a freedom to embrace in a poised present state what is. Om Tat Sat, as the Indian epic said. And now all of a sudden you're just present. And you realize that if there was a intelligence in the universe, a divine intelligence in the theological systems, you realize that what is that. And now you have no desire to change what is. And you realize that you're now present. And now you are freed in your will, but it happens to match what seemed to be predestined. And there's no paradox. So in that state, there's no paradox in the philosophy. There's only a paradox as long as you're in your amygdala and you're trying to put an evaluation of what's right and wrong and good and bad and the moral hypocrisies that people trap in. But once you transcend that, and see that there's a pair of, there's, a trait that you admired. People think when they get this guy that's intelligent or something, that's what I want. And then you find out that they also have a peccadillo called, they'll argue with you, that they think they're right, they know it all. And then you go, oh, this trait that I admired now becomes my nightmare. And this trait that I despise, that they're working all the time, gave me a nice house, paid for my kids' schooling, got me nice clothes. So the things you dislike has upside. The thing you like, that's why John Milton says that you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. So the idea of a polarized idea instead of a synthesized idea is what traps people in the moral paradox and the paradox of free will and predestination. And it doesn't actually occur. It just appears to occur in a mind that's not fully awakened.
I could ask you questions all day, good sir, but I want to be super respectful of your time. I have a word here at Always Better Than Yesterday, and it's called Heartprint. A bit like fingerprint, but Heartprint. And I believe that when we love people, when we serve people, when we lead people well, we'll leave a heartprint where people are left better in some way. And this may be a really unfair and difficult question to ask you, given the sheer amount of goodness that you've put into the world, your creation. But what do you think your heartprint is?
Well, I've had a dream to help people discover the magnificence of the universe. And the magnificence of themselves inseparable from that. I tell people that no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love. And then no matter what you've done or not done, you're participating in it. And that's why I think I developed that methodology to help people see that. But it's interesting. The way the brain is set up, when you do live by your highest value and you're living congruent and authentic to what's really most important and meaningful to you, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain, the executive center. Now that forebrain uses glutamate, which is a facilitator, and an inhibitor, which is GABA, to calm down the amygdala's impulses and instincts, which are distractions. And it sends a signal over to the suprachiasmatic nucleus to synchronize all the biorhythms of the body, which goes to the epithalamus back up to the pineal. And it also then goes over to the autonomic centers in the midbrain. And it automatically causes a regulation of them, which then goes down to the heart, to the intracardiac network of the heart, and synchronizes the sinoatrial node, and the hormones are coming out there and synchronize the heart. And the moment those are perfectly synchronized, we feel an open heart. Mm-hmm. So an open heart is a confirmation of living authentically, to let us know we're not distracted by extrinsic misunderstandings of the magnificent universe. And we're having a moment of seeing the magnificence, and we're rewarded with a feeling of fulfillment, and we're being authentic. So I do believe that the Heartprint is real. And it's unique to each individual because they have a hierarchy of values, which are like a fingerprint. And if they fulfill what's truly authentic to them, their heart lets them know that. And the physiology of the heart maximizes its pumping of blood for the sake of the heart. The right heart is pumping blood up into the lung to get the oxidation. The left one is going down into the body for reduction. And so it's trying to bring a perfect balance into the physiology between the heaven force and the earth force, day and night, the phototropic and the gravitropic components of our nature, put it all back in a balance. So we really get rewarded by realizing the magnificence. And I tell my students, I say, see if you can come up with a more magnificent structure than the human brain and body for getting things done. It's a pretty amazing structure.
I have a heart on fire right now and a tear of gratitude. That was a beautiful, beautiful answer. Thank you. It's definitely one of my favorite answers. That is my favorite response to that question. Good sir. Thank you so much. That's super, super powerful. Dr. John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for so much goodness that you've put into the world. Thank you for the gracious time that you've spent here with us. And I'd be honored if you'd leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Yeah, well, whoever's listening, the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies you may impose on yourself through the comparison of yourself to other people. Don't put people on pedestals. Don't put them in pits. Just put them in your heart. There's nothing you'll see in them that you don't have in you if you look with reflective awareness. And that way, when you see somebody you admire, look inside, because you have the capacity to stand on their shoulders and do something even greater. And give yourself permission to shine, not shrink. Radiate, not gravitate. Love, not judge.
Thank you. Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday, where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.